The December wind cut through Sophia Turner's threadbare shawl like 1,000 frozen knives. Her fingers so numb she could barely feel the carved wooden angels she had spent 3 months creating. The Christmas market in Downieville, California, was winding down as the sun began its descent behind the Sierra Nevada mountains, casting long shadows across the muddy streets. Sophia watched as the last few potential customers hurried past her cart without so much as a glance, their arms already laden with purchases from the more established vendors who had prime spots near the center of the square. It was 1876, and the gold rush might have faded into history, but Downieville still held onto its rough edges and rougher people. Sophia had arrived in town 6 months ago after her father died in a mining accident, leaving her with nothing but debts and a talent for woodcarving he had taught her during quiet evenings by the fire. She had hoped the Christmas market would be her salvation, a chance to sell enough of her handcrafted ornaments, figurines, and toys to pay for food and lodging through the brutal mountain winter. Instead, she stood shivering behind a cart full of unsold goods as darkness crept closer and the temperature dropped even further. The other vendors had already packed up and left, their successful day evident in their cheerful farewells and jingling pockets. Sophia had made exactly 3 sales all day, barely enough to cover the fee for her spot at the market. She pulled her shawl tighter, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Her boarding house room was paid through the end of the week, but after that, she had nowhere to go and no money to get there. "Miss, the market's closed. You need to move along." The marshal's deputy stood a few feet away, his expression not unkind but firm. He was young, probably not much older than Sophia's 22 years, and he looked uncomfortable delivering the news. "I know," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am just gathering my things." It was a lie, of course. She had no idea how she would transport the heavy cart back to the boarding house, and even less idea of what she would do tomorrow. The deputy nodded and moved on, beginning to extinguish the oil lamps that lined the square. Soon she would be standing in complete darkness, surrounded by the fruits of her labor that no one wanted. That was when she heard the footsteps, steady and deliberate, moving through the empty market. Sophia looked up to see a tall figure approaching through the gathering gloom. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He was a man in his late 20s, dressed in worn but clean work clothes, a heavy coat that had seen better days, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Everything about him spoke of the land, from his sun-weathered skin to the dust on his boots. He stopped in front of her cart, his eyes scanning the array of carved items displayed there. Sophia waited for him to move on like everyone else, but he stayed, picking up one of the angels with surprising gentleness for such large, work-hardened hands. "Did you make these?" His voice was deep and quiet, with a slight roughness that suggested he did not use it often. "Yes, sir," Sophia replied, trying to keep the desperation from her tone. "Each one is hand-carved from pine and cedar. The larger figurines are oak. I can make custom orders as well if you are interested." He turned the angel over in his hands, examining the delicate wings and carefully painted details. "How much?" "The angels are 50 cents each. The larger pieces range from $1 to $5, depending on the size and complexity." He set the angel down carefully and picked up a nativity scene she had spent 2 weeks perfecting. The figures were small but detailed, each face expressing wonder or joy. His expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes softened as he studied the tiny carved infant in the manger. "How much for everything?" he asked. Sophia blinked, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry, what?" "The whole cart. Everything here. How much would it cost to buy it all? Her mind raced, trying to calculate the total value of her remaining inventory. That would be approximately $65 worth of merchandise, sir. It was a fortune to her, nearly 2 months' wages for a working man. She expected him to laugh or walk away, but instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He counted out bills with the same careful deliberation he had used to examine her carvings. "I will give you 80, he said, holding out the money. "That should cover your trouble and the cart itself. I will need it to transport everything." Sophia stared at the money, then at him, unable to comprehend what was happening. "Sir, I do not understand. Why would you buy all of this?" He shrugged, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed more than words. "You are freezing, it is getting dark, and you need the money." "I have the money and could use some decent decorations for my ranch. Seems like a fair trade to me." "Your ranch?" Sophia heard herself say, still not reaching for the money despite every instinct screaming at her to take it. "The Triple R, about 5 miles outside town." "Not much to look at right now, but I am working on it." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "Name is Preston Riley. I have been watching you here all day. You have got real talent, Miss Turner. Sophia Turner." She finally took the money with trembling fingers, hardly daring to believe this was real. "Thank you, Mr. Riley. You cannot know what this means to me." "I expect I can," he said, his tone gentle. "I have been where you are more than once. Now, where are you staying?" "I can take you and your things there before heading home." Sophia gave him the address of her boarding house, and Preston retrieved a sturdy wagon from a nearby stable. He loaded her cart and all its contents with efficient ease, then helped her up onto the bench seat. The wagon was old but well-maintained, like everything else about him. As they moved through the darkening streets, Sophia studied him from the corner of her eye. Preston Riley was handsome in a weathered, unpolished way. His face was all strong lines and angles, with deep-set eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing little. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his hands on the reins were scarred from years of hard work. He drove in silence, seemingly comfortable with the quiet in a way that most people were not. "Why did you really buy everything?" Sophia asked as they turned onto the street where she boarded. "Please, be honest with me." Preston was quiet for a long moment, the only sounds the clip-clop of horse hooves and the creak of wagon wheels. "Because I know what it is like to watch something you built with your own hands be dismissed and rejected. Because it is almost Christmas, and no one should be standing in the cold with nothing to show for their work. And because your carvings are beautiful, Miss Turner. They deserved better than to end up gathering dust in some storage shed." His words were simple but sincere, and Sophia felt something warm bloom in her chest despite the cold. Most people would have just walked by. "I am not most people." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of her boarding house. "I will unload your cart here. The goods I will keep if that is acceptable to you. Of course, you paid for them." Sophia climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady. "Mr. Riley, I do not know what I would have done if you had not come along." He lifted the empty cart down with ease, setting it beside the boarding house entrance. "You would have figured something out. You have got the look of someone who does not give up easy." He tipped his hat to her. "Good evening, Miss Turner. I hope the rest of your winter is warmer than today was." He was turning to leave when Sophia heard herself call out. "Wait." Preston paused, looking back at her with those quiet, watchful eyes. "If you truly want more decorations for your ranch, I could make custom pieces for you. At a fair price, of course. I could even come out to see the space if you wanted to better understand what might work best." It was bold, perhaps too bold, but Sophia had nothing left to lose. Preston studied her for a long moment, and she thought she saw the ghost of a smile touch his lips. "The triple R is always short on hands, especially during winter," he said slowly. "I do not suppose you know anything about cooking or keeping house." "I kept house for my father for 10 years, Sophia replied, her heart beginning to race. "I am a decent cook, and I know my way around basic ranch work. My father worked a small claim before the accident." Preston nodded, seeming to come to a decision. "I have got a housekeeper's cottage on the property. Has not been used in a few years, but it is sound and has a good stove. If you are interested in the work, the job is yours. Room, board, and $30 a month. You can keep your woodcarving on the side, sell whatever you make in town or wherever you like." $30 a month was more than fair for a housekeeper, especially with room and board included. Sophia knew she should be suspicious of such generosity from a stranger, but something in Preston Riley's steady gaze told her he was exactly what he appeared to be, an honest man offering honest work. "When would you want me to start?" she asked. "Day after tomorrow, if that suits you. That will give you time to settle your affairs here in town." He reached into his wallet again and pulled out a few more bills. "Advance on your first month's wages, so you can pay whatever you owe and get supplies you might need." Sophia shook her head. "You have already been more than generous, Mr. Riley." "It is not generosity, Miss Turner. It is good business. A housekeeper who is worried about debts and unpaid bills will not do her best work. Consider it an investment." He pressed the money into her hand before she could protest further. "I will come by with the wagon at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. Pack light, but bring whatever you need to be comfortable. The ranch can be isolated, especially in winter." With that, he climbed back onto his wagon and drove away, leaving Sophia standing in the cold with more money than she had held in months, and the first real hope she had felt since her father's death. She watched until the wagon disappeared around a corner, then hurried inside to her cramped, cold room. That night, Sophia lay awake beneath her thin blanket, turning the day's events over in her mind. Preston Riley was unlike any man she had met in Downieville. The miners and merchants she encountered were either rough and crude or oily with false charm. Preston had been neither. He was quiet, thoughtful, and genuine in a way that seemed almost out of place in this hardscrabble mountain town. She thought about the way he had examined her carvings, with real appreciation in his eyes. The way he had asked questions and listened to her answers as if they mattered. The care with which he had loaded her cart, making sure nothing was damaged. Small things, perhaps, but they painted a picture of a man who paid attention to details and treated people with respect. Sophia also could not help but notice that he was attractive, in a rough-hewn way that matched the landscape around them. She pushed that thought away almost as soon as it formed. This was a job, nothing more. She could not afford to complicate it with foolish romantic notions. Preston Riley had shown her kindness, yes, but that did not mean anything beyond what it was, a man helping someone in need. Still, as she finally drifted off to sleep, her last thoughts were of his quiet voice and steady hands, and the unexpected gentleness with which he had held her carved angel. The next day and a half passed in a blur of activity. Sophia paid her outstanding boarding house fees and the small debts she had accumulated at the general store. She purchased practical items for her new position, sturdy work dresses, an extra pair of boots, and supplies for her wood carving. With what remained of Preston's advance, she bought a few luxuries: coffee, real sugar, and a warm woolen blanket. She also made discreet inquiries about Preston Riley and the Triple R Ranch. What she learned was reassuring. He had bought the property 3 years ago, a struggling cattle ranch that the previous owner had run into the ground. Preston had been working alone to restore it, building up the herd, repairing buildings, and improving the land. People described him as honest but solitary, a man who kept to himself and paid his bills on time. A bit strange, keeping to himself like that, one of the shopkeepers told her. But there is no harm in him. He is just quiet, always has been. Some folks say he came west to forget something, but who has not got things they would rather leave behind? Sophia understood that sentiment all too well. She had her own ghosts, memories of her father's laugh, the small cabin they had shared, the dreams they had built together before the mine collapse took him from her. Coming to the Triple R felt like a chance to start fresh, to build something new instead of constantly mourning what she had lost. Friday morning arrived cold but clear, with the kind of crisp mountain air that made everything seem sharper and more real. Sophia was ready and waiting when Preston's wagon pulled up precisely at 8 o'clock. He helped her load her few possessions, which fit easily into 2 carpet bags and a small trunk. "Travel light, do you?" he observed, securing her trunk with rope. "I have learned that most things people think they need, they can do without," Sophia replied, climbing up onto the wagon seat. "Makes moving easier when you do not have much to pack." Preston nodded approvingly and climbed up beside her. "You will do well at the ranch, I think. It is not a place for people who need a lot of fuss and fancy things." They left Downieville behind, following a rough road that wound through pine forests and across icy streams. The landscape was beautiful in its winter starkness, all white snow and dark trees against a brilliant blue sky. Preston pointed out landmarks as they traveled: a lightning-struck oak that marked the boundary of his property, a spring that ran year-round and provided fresh water for the ranch, a meadow where wildflowers bloomed in summer. "How long have you been in California?" Sophia asked, curious about the man beside her. "About 5 years now. Came out from Missouri after the war ended." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Sophia heard the weight of unspoken history in those words. "The war was hard on a lot of people," she said gently. "It was. But California offered a chance to start over, and I needed that." He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "What about you? You do not sound like a California native." "Pennsylvania originally. My mother died when I was young, and it was just my father and me after that. He got gold fever like so many others, and we came west when I was 12. We never struck it rich, but we got by." Sophia paused, swallowing against the familiar ache of loss. "He died last May. Cave in at the mine where he was working." "I am sorry," Preston said, and the simplicity of his condolence somehow meant more than elaborate expressions of sympathy would have. "Mining is dangerous work. Too many good men lost to it." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon creaking along the rutted road. Sophia found herself relaxing in Preston's presence. He did not feel the need to fill every moment with chatter, nor did he treat her silence as an invitation to pry into painful subjects. He simply drove, occasionally pointing out a deer in the trees or a hawk circling overhead. "There," he said eventually, gesturing ahead. "The Triple R." Sophia leaned forward, eager for her first glimpse of what would be her new home. The ranch sat in a wide valley, protected on 3 sides by forested hills. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and one side. Near it stood a barn, several smaller outbuildings, and what looked like a bunkhouse, though it appeared unused. "The housekeeper's cottage is just behind the main house," Preston said, guiding the wagon down the gentle slope into the valley. "It is small but private. You will take your meals in the main house kitchen, or I can show you how to work the account at the general store in town if you prefer to keep your own supplies." As they drew closer, Sophia could see signs of Preston's hard work everywhere. The fences were mended and sturdy, the barn door hung straight on new hinges, and the yard, while rough, was clear of debris and clutter. This was not a neglected property, but one being slowly and carefully restored. Preston pulled the wagon to a stop near a small cabin that Sophia had not noticed at first, tucked as it was behind a stand of pines. It was built in the same style as the main house, but much smaller, perhaps 2 rooms at most. The porch was narrow but covered, and someone had recently cleared the snow from the steps. "Let me show you inside," Preston said, jumping down and offering his hand to help her descend. His grip was warm and strong, even through her gloves, and Sophia felt that strange flutter in her chest again. She firmly ignored it. The cottage's interior was simple but clean. The front room served as both living space and bedroom, with an iron bedstead in one corner, a small table and 2 chairs near the window, and a rocking chair by the stone fireplace. The back room was a compact kitchen with a good cookstove, shelves for supplies, and a dry sink with a hand pump. "The pump connects to the same spring that supplies the main house," Preston explained, working the handle to demonstrate. Clear, cold water gushed out. "I cleaned the place up yesterday and got the fires going so it would not be freezing when you arrived. Brought over some basic supplies too, coffee, flour, beans, and such. But like I said, you can get whatever you need from town." Sophia turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. The cottage was small, yes, but it was clean, sound, and hers. After months of living in a cramped boarding house room that smelled of cabbage and unwashed bodies, this felt like a palace. "It is wonderful," she said, and meant it. "Thank you, Mr. Riley." "Preston," he corrected. "We are not formal out here, and you are welcome, Sophia. Now, let me bring your things in, and then I will show you the main house so you know what you will be working with." He carried her trunk and bags inside as if they weighed nothing, setting them beside the bed. Sophia noticed that he had indeed stocked the kitchen shelves, and there was fresh kindling stacked beside the fireplace, and an oil lamp on the table with a full reservoir. Small touches, but they showed forethought and consideration. The main house was even more impressive inside than out. The rooms were large and well built, with high ceilings and big windows that let in plenty of light. The furniture was sparse but solid, clearly made by someone who valued function over decoration. The kitchen was spacious, with a massive cookstove, a long work table, and a separate pantry. "I have been doing my own cooking, such as it is," Preston admitted, showing her the pantry's contents. "Mostly beans, bacon, and coffee. I can keep a man alive, but I would not call it good eating." "I can do better than that," Sophia assured him, already mentally planning meals from the supplies she saw. "When would you like me to start? Take today to settle in and rest from the journey. Tomorrow is soon enough to begin." Preston pulled a pocket watch from his vest, checking the time. "I have got work to do in the barn, but I will come by around 6 this evening. You can join me for supper in the main house, and we can discuss your duties and the household routine." After he left, Sophia returned to her cottage and set about making it truly hers. She unpacked her clothes, hanging her spare dress on a hook behind the door and storing her undergarments and other items in the small chest of drawers. Her wood-carving tools and supplies went on a shelf in the kitchen, where the light from the window would be good for close work. She made up the bed with her new blanket, and the clean linens Preston had left folded on the mattress. The pillow was stuffed with fresh straw and surprisingly comfortable. By the fireplace, she arranged her few personal items, a daguerreotype type of her parents on their wedding day, a small Bible that had belonged to her mother, and a carved wooden box her father had made for her 10th birthday. When everything was in its place, Sophia sat in the rocking chair and allowed herself to simply breathe. For the first time in months, she felt safe. The cottage was warm, her immediate needs were met, and she had steady work that would keep her fed and housed through the winter and beyond. Thanks to Preston Riley, she had been given a second chance. That evening, Sophia walked through the cold darkness to the main house, guided by the warm light glowing in the windows. She knocked on the kitchen door, and Preston's deep voice called for her to enter. She found him at the cook stove, attempting to fry bacon and hash potatoes simultaneously with mixed results. "I am a better rancher than cook," he said wryly, stepping back to let her take over. "Please, rescue this before I burn the house down." Sophia could not help but laugh as she surveyed the situation. The bacon was overcooked on one side and raw on the other, while the potatoes were sticking to the pan. "Go sit down," she instructed. "I will handle this." She salvaged what she could and prepared fresh portions, working quickly and efficiently in the well-equipped kitchen. Within 20 minutes, she had produced a proper meal of evenly cooked bacon, crispy potatoes, scrambled eggs, and biscuits made from the sourdough starter she found in the pantry. Preston ate with the focused appreciation of a man who was used to poor food and knew good cooking when he tasted it. "This is excellent," he said between bites. "If you can do this every day, you will be earning every penny of your wages." Over supper, they discussed the household arrangements. Sophia would prepare breakfast, dinner, and supper, keep the main house clean and orderly, manage the laundry, and handle any mending that needed doing. In return, she would have her cottage, all her meals, and her monthly wages. She was free to use any spare time as she wished, including her woodcarving work. "I will be expanding the herd in the spring," Preston told her. "Might hire on a hand or two to help with the work. If that happens, their meals would be your responsibility as well, though I will adjust your wages accordingly." "That seems fair," Sophia agreed. "What about supplies? How often do you go into town?" "Usually once a week, weather permitting." "I can take you along if you need to go, or I can pick up whatever you need. There is also a root cellar behind the main house, stocked with preserves and vegetables I put up myself. They are edible, but I am sure you can do better next harvest." They talked as the evening wore on, the conversation flowing more easily than Sophia would have expected. Preston was not a chatty man, but when he spoke, he said things worth hearing. He told her about his plans for the ranch, his hopes to build up a quality herd that would be known throughout the region. He spoke about the land with genuine affection, describing the way the valley looked in spring when the wildflowers bloomed, or in autumn when the aspens turned gold. In turn, Sophia found herself telling him about her woodcarving, how her father had taught her to see the shapes hidden in each piece of wood, waiting to be revealed. She described the satisfaction of watching something beautiful emerge from her hands, the way time seemed to stop when she was deep in the work of carving and sanding and bringing her vision to life. "You should set up a workspace in your cottage," Preston suggested. "The light from that big window would be good for detail work. I can bring you more wood if you need it, plenty of fallen timber in the forests around here." "That would be wonderful," Sophia said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I have been thinking about what you said about decorations for the ranch. I could make something special for the main house if you would like, a proper Christmas display." Preston's expression softened. "I would like that. It has been a long time since this house felt like a home, instead of just a place to sleep between work. Your carvings might help change that." As Sophia walked back to her cottage that night, the cold air sharp in her lungs and the stars brilliant overhead, she reflected on the strangeness of her situation. 2 days ago, she had been alone and desperate in a crowded Christmas market. Now she was living on a remote ranch, working for a quiet man who had shown her more kindness in 2 days than most people managed in a lifetime. She thought about the way Preston had looked at her across the supper table, his dark eyes warm in the lamplight. The way he listened when she spoke, as if her words actually mattered to him. The quiet strength in his hands and voice, the unexpected gentleness beneath his weathered exterior. "Do not be foolish," she whispered to herself as she prepared for bed. "He is your employer, nothing more. You cannot afford to risk this position by developing feelings that are not returned and never will be." But as she drifted off to sleep in her warm, comfortable bed, her last thoughts were of Preston's rare smile and the hope of seeing it again tomorrow. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Sophia rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, usually eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits or flapjacks. Preston ate quickly and headed out to tend the cattle and handle the endless tasks that came with running a ranch alone. While he worked, Sophia cleaned the house, did laundry, and prepared the midday dinner, which Preston ate whenever his work brought him back to the house. Afternoons were often her own, and she used the time to set up her wood-carving workspace in the cottage. Preston had been true to his word, bringing her several fine pieces of cedar and pine from the forest. She began work on a special nativity scene for the main house, larger and more detailed than anything she had attempted before. Evenings were spent preparing supper, which she and Preston usually ate together in the main house kitchen. These meals had become Sophia's favorite part of the day. As the initial awkwardness faded, conversation came more easily. Preston proved to have a dry sense of humor and a wealth of stories from his years of wandering before settling in California. He told her about working on cattle drives through Texas, about nearly freezing to death during a Montana winter, about the time he won a horse in a poker game only to discover it was half wild and took 3 weeks to break. His stories were never boastful, just honest accounts of a hard life lived on the frontier. Sophia shared her own memories, happier times with her father before the accident, the bustling streets of Philadelphia where she had been born, the long journey west that had changed everything. She found herself telling Preston things she had never told anyone, her fears and doubts, her dreams for the future, the loneliness that had haunted her since her father's death. "It is the silence that gets to you," she admitted one evening as they cleaned up after supper. "Not the being alone exactly, but the feeling that no one would notice if you just disappeared, that your life does not matter to anyone." Preston was quiet for a long moment, drying the plate she handed him with careful attention. "Your life matters," he said finally, his voice low and serious. "To me, if no one else. This ranch feels different now, better since you came, like it is actually alive instead of just existing." The sincerity in his words made Sophia's breath catch. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. Before she could analyze it or talk herself out of what she was feeling, Preston cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should check on the cattle one more time before bed," he said, his tone deliberately casual. "Thank you for another fine meal, Sophia." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the kitchen with a dish towel in her hands and a confused tangle of emotions in her chest. She finished cleaning up slowly, trying to sort through what had just happened. The moment had been brief, barely there, but she had not imagined the warmth in Preston's eyes or the way his voice had roughened when he said her life mattered. Was it possible that he felt something too? Or was she reading too much into simple kindness? Sophia had no experience with courtship or romance. Her father had been protective, and their isolated life had left little opportunity for her to meet young men, much less form attachments. She had no idea how to interpret Preston's behavior or her own racing pulse. Winter deepened as December progressed toward Christmas. Snow fell frequently, blanketing the valley in white and making the ranch feel even more isolated from the rest of the world. But Sophia found she did not mind the isolation. The Triple R was becoming home in a way no place had been since her father's death. She threw herself into preparations for Christmas, determined to give Preston a proper celebration. In addition to the nativity scene, she carved a dozen ornaments to hang on the small pine tree he cut and brought into the main house. She baked cookies using precious sugar and spices, filling the house with the scents of cinnamon and nutmeg. She even managed to make a few small gifts: a new leather cover for Preston's worn Bible, a set of carved wooden buttons to replace the mismatched ones on his best shirt. Preston, for his part, seemed bemused by all the activity but went along with it good-naturedly. He helped her string cranberries and popcorn for the tree, his large fingers surprisingly adept at the delicate work. He brought in extra firewood so the house would stay warm through the holiday. And one evening, he produced a bottle of whiskey he had been saving. "For Christmas," he explained, setting it on the kitchen table. "Figured we could toast the season properly." 2 days before Christmas, a heavy snowstorm rolled through the valley, dumping nearly 2 feet of fresh powder and making it impossible to venture far from the buildings. Preston spent the day in the barn, caring for the animals and making sure they had enough feed and water. Sophia kept fires burning in both the cottage and the main house and prepared a hearty beef stew for supper. That evening, as the storm howled outside, they sat in the main house living room instead of the kitchen. Preston had built up the fire until it roared, pushing back the cold and casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Sophia brought her latest carving project, a wise man for the nativity scene, and worked on the fine details while Preston mended tack and oiled his tools. "Tell me about Missouri," Sophia said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What was your life like before the war?" Preston's hands stilled on the bridle he was working on. For a moment, she thought he would not answer, but then he set the leather aside and stared into the fire. "My father had a farm, about 100 acres of decent land, grew corn and tobacco, kept some cattle and hogs. I was the youngest of 4 sons, so everyone knew I would not inherit much. The plan was for me to learn a trade, maybe become a blacksmith or carpenter." He paused, his expression distant. "Then the war came and everything changed." "You fought," Sophia asked softly, "for 3 years. My 2 oldest brothers did not come home. The third lost an arm at Shiloh and never was the same after. When it was over, I could not go back to the farm. Too many ghosts, too many memories. So I took my mustering out pay and headed west." "I am sorry," Sophia said, echoing the simple condolence he had offered her weeks ago. "War takes too much from too many people." "It does, but it also taught me some things. That I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive things I never imagined surviving. And that when you get a second chance at life, you better make something of it." He looked at her then, his eyes intense in the firelight. "That is what the Triple R is for me, my second chance, my chance to build something that matters." "You are doing that," Sophia said with conviction. "This ranch, what you have accomplished here in just 3 years, it is remarkable. You should be proud." "It feels less lonely now," Preston said quietly. "Having you here, I did not realize how much I missed having someone to talk to until you arrived. Someone who understands about second chances and starting over." The air between them felt charged somehow, heavy with unspoken words. Sophia set down her carving, her full attention on Preston. He stood slowly, crossing the few feet that separated them, and knelt beside her chair so they were at eye level. "Sophia, I need to be honest with you about something," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I did not buy your cart just to be kind. I mean, that was part of it, but not all. I had been watching you all day, and I could not stop thinking about how brave you were, standing there in the cold, refusing to give up even when no one was buying. And how beautiful you looked, even half frozen and exhausted." Sophia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "Preston, let me finish, please. I know this is not proper. You work for me, and I should not be saying any of this. But I cannot keep pretending that I think of you only as my housekeeper. You have become important to me, more important than I ever expected anyone to be again. And if you do not feel the same way, I understand. We can forget I ever said anything and go back to how things were. But I had to tell you. I had to be honest." For a moment, Sophia could not speak, overwhelmed by the rush of joy and relief flooding through her. Then she reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, telling myself it was foolish and would only lead to heartache. But I cannot help it, Preston. When I am with you, I feel safe and valued and seen in a way I never have before. You make me want to believe in happy endings again." The smile that spread across Preston's face was like sunrise, transforming his usually serious features into something radiant. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I do not have much practice at courting," he admitted. "And I know the situation is complicated with you working here, but I would like to try, if you are willing, to see if what we are feeling might grow into something lasting." "I would like that too," Sophia said, her own smile matching his. "Very much." Preston stood, drawing her up with him, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, the fire crackling behind them and the storm raging outside. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, almost chaste, but it sent warmth flooding through Sophia's entire body. His lips were soft against hers, his hands careful where they rested on her waist. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Preston confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "I have wanted you to," Sophia replied, feeling bold and breathless and happier than she could remember being in years. They stayed up late that night, talking and occasionally kissing, learning the shape and feel of this new thing growing between them. Preston told her about his dreams for the ranch, how he wanted to build it into something he could pass on to future generations. Sophia shared her hope of opening a small shop in town someday, selling her carvings to a wider market. "We could do both," Preston said thoughtfully. "Build up the ranch and help you establish your business. They do not have to be separate dreams." The idea of a shared future, of building something together, filled Sophia with a hope so fierce it almost hurt. She had thought her life was effectively over when her father died, that the best she could hope for was mere survival. But here, in this remote valley with this quiet, strong man, she was discovering that new dreams could grow from the ashes of old ones. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, the fresh snow sparkling like diamonds in the bright sunshine. Sophia woke in her cottage feeling as if she were glowing from the inside out. She dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep green wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned up her dark hair with extra care. Preston met her at the door of the main house, handsome in a clean shirt and his Sunday vest. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he caught her hand, pulling her inside. "Merry Christmas," he said, kissing her soundly. "Merry Christmas," she replied, laughing against his lips. They spent the morning in the warm kitchen, Sophia preparing a feast while Preston helped where he could, mostly by staying out of her way and sneaking tastes when he thought she was not looking. She roasted a chicken with vegetables, made fresh bread, and even managed a dried apple pie for dessert. Over dinner, Preston presented her with a gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautiful shawl, thick and warm, in a soft blue that reminded her of summer skies. "I picked it up in town last week," he explained. "I hated seeing you shiver in that old threadbare thing you have been wearing." "It is beautiful," Sophia said, running her fingers over the fine wool. "Thank you, Preston." She gave him her gifts then and watched with pleasure as he examined the leather Bible cover and the carved buttons with genuine appreciation. "These are wonderful," he said, turning one of the buttons over in his palm. "You have real talent, Sophia. People should be able to buy your work year-round, not just at Christmas markets." "Maybe someday," she said. "For now, I am happy making things for people I care about." That afternoon, they sat together on the sofa in the living room, Sophia tucked against Preston's side with his arm around her shoulders. The house was warm and filled with the sense of good food and pine from the Christmas tree. Snow fell softly outside the windows, but inside, all was comfort and contentment. "I never thought I would have this," Preston said quietly, pressing a kiss to the top of Sophia's head. "A real home, someone to share it with. After the war, I figured I would just work the ranch alone until I died, and that would be that. I never thought I would be happy again after my father died," Sophia confessed. "But you have given me hope, Preston. You have given me a future to look forward to instead of just a past to mourn." "We will build that future together," Preston promised. "However long it takes, whatever it looks like, together." The winter months that followed were some of the happiest of Sophia's life. Though the weather kept them largely confined to the ranch, she did not mind. She had everything she needed right here: meaningful work, a comfortable home, and a man who loved her and showed it in countless small ways every day. Preston was not flowery with words or grand romantic gestures, but he demonstrated his feelings through actions. He brought her the best pieces of wood he could find for her carvings. He learned to make coffee just the way she liked it, so she would have a cup waiting when she arrived at the main house each morning. He listened when she talked about her dreams and took them seriously, helping her think through practical steps to make them reality. In turn, Sophia learned the language of Preston's heart. She discovered that he loved it when she sang while she worked, even though her voice was nothing special. She learned that his favorite meal was pot roast with carrots and potatoes, and that he had a secret weakness for molasses cookies. She found that the surest way to make him smile was to tease him gently about his serious nature. They also learned to navigate the physical side of their relationship with care and respect. Preston was always conscious of propriety, never pushing Sophia further than she was comfortable going. Their kisses grew longer and more passionate, but he always pulled back before things went too far, mindful of her reputation and his own sense of honor. "I want to do this right," he told her one evening when they were both breathing hard from kissing. "When we come together fully, I want it to be as husband and wife, with nothing to hide and no regrets." Sophia appreciated his restraint, even as her body ached for more. She had been raised to value her virtue, but more than that, she valued the respect Preston showed her. He saw her as an equal partner in their relationship, not just an object of desire, and that meant everything. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Preston began talking more seriously about marriage. He wanted to marry her, he said, but he wanted to give her the wedding she deserved, with a proper dress and a celebration, not just a quick ceremony in front of a judge. "I have some money saved," he said one March evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Enough to buy you a good dress and have a real party afterward. Maybe in June when the weather is fine and the valley is at its best." "June sounds perfect," Sophia agreed, her heart swelling with happiness. "But Preston, I do not need anything fancy, I just need you." "You will have me for the rest of our lives," he promised, taking her hand. "But you also deserve one perfect day to start it all. Let me give you that." Spring brought new life to the Triple R. The snow melted, revealing grass and wildflowers beneath. Preston's cattle, which had survived the winter in good health, were turned out to graze in the greening meadows. Birds returned from their southern migrations, filling the air with song. And Sophia's garden, planted in the sunny spot behind her cottage, began to sprout with vegetables and herbs. Preston hired 2 ranch hands to help with the spring work. 2 brothers named Jack and Tom Wheeler, who had been working ranches in the area for years. They were good men, hard-working and respectful, and Sophia enjoyed the challenge of cooking for 4 instead of 2. The Wheeler brothers quickly picked up on the relationship between Sophia and Preston, though neither man said anything directly. But Sophia noticed the knowing looks they exchanged when Preston touched her hand across the dinner table, or when they found excuses to linger near each other. "Boss is a lucky man," Jack said to Sophia one day when she brought lunch out to where the men were mending fence. "Do not think I have ever seen him smile as much as he has since you came." "I am the lucky one," Sophia replied, meaning it with all her heart. In April, Preston took Sophia into Downieville to shop for her wedding dress. She chose a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored silk, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The seamstress promised to have it altered to fit perfectly by the end of May. While they were in town, Preston also stopped at the jeweler's shop. Sophia watched, her eyes misting with happy tears as he purchased 2 simple gold wedding bands. When the jeweler asked if he wanted anything engraved inside, Preston looked at Sophia. "What do you think?" he asked. "Our initials and the date," Sophia suggested. "Simple and lasting like us." "Perfect," Preston agreed. They set the wedding date for the first Saturday in June and invited everyone Preston knew in the area, which turned out to be more people than Sophia expected. The quiet rancher had made more friends than he realized in his 3 years at the Triple R, and all of them were happy to celebrate his marriage. Sophia invited the few people she knew from Downieville, including the kind deputy who had told her the market was closing on that fateful December day. She also spent hours preparing food for the celebration, determined to feed their guests well. The Wheeler brothers helped Preston prepare the ranch for the wedding. They strung lanterns between the trees near the main house, built tables and benches for the guests, and even constructed a small platform for dancing. Preston grumbled about the fuss but went along with it, clearly pleased to be making Sophia happy. The night before the wedding, Preston walked Sophia back to her cottage as he had done every night for months. At her door, he took both her hands in his and looked at her with such love that it took her breath away. "This is the last night you will sleep alone," he said softly. "Tomorrow you will be my wife and we will share the bed in the main house for the rest of our lives. Are you ready for that? Really ready?" "I have been ready since Christmas," Sophia assured him. "I love you, Preston Riley, and I cannot wait to be your wife." "I love you too, Sophia Turner." Soon to be Sophia Riley. He kissed her gently, tenderly. "Sleep well, my darling. Tomorrow our life together truly begins." The wedding day dawned bright and beautiful, with clear skies and warm sunshine that made the valley look like paradise. Sophia dressed in her cottage with help from the wife of one of Preston's neighbors, a kind woman named Martha who had taken Sophia under her wing. "You look beautiful, dear," Martha said, adjusting the flowers in Sophia's hair. "Preston will not be able to take his eyes off you." The ceremony took place in the yard between the main house and Sophia's cottage, with the minister from Downieville officiating. Sophia walked from her cottage alone, having no father or family to give her away, but she did not feel sad about it. She was walking toward her future, toward the man she loved, and that was enough. Preston stood waiting for her, dressed in a new suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. But when he saw Sophia approaching, his entire face lit up with such joy that several people in the gathered crowd murmured appreciatively. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They exchanged their vows in clear, strong voices, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed Sophia with such passion that the guests hooted and applauded. The celebration that followed was everything Sophia could have hoped for. There was music and dancing, abundant food and drink, and the warm wishes of friends and neighbors. Preston, who normally avoided large gatherings, seemed genuinely happy, laughing and talking with their guests. But Sophia could see the impatience in his eyes, the way he kept looking at her with barely contained desire. She felt the same way, eager for the guests to leave so they could finally be alone as husband and wife. Finally, as the sun began to set, people started making their farewells. The Wheeler brothers good-naturedly shooed away the last lingering guests, giving Preston and Sophia knowing grins as they headed to the bunkhouse for the night. Preston took Sophia's hand and led her into the main house, up the stairs to the bedroom he had prepared for them. He had cleaned and organized the space, put fresh linens on the large bed, and even scattered some of the wildflowers she loved across the dresser. "I wanted it to be nice for you," he said, suddenly seeming shy despite being a grown man of 29 years. "It is perfect," Sophia assured him. "You are perfect." What followed was tender and passionate, awkward in moments as all first times are, but ultimately beautiful. Preston was gentle and patient, taking his time to make sure Sophia felt loved and cherished. And when they finally came together fully as husband and wife, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed, Sophia's head on Preston's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. "I love you, Mrs. Riley," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too, Mr. Riley," she replied, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Thank you for buying my cart that day, for seeing me when no one else did." "Thank you for agreeing to come to the ranch," Preston countered. "For taking a chance on a quiet, awkward man who did not know how to express his feelings." "We took a chance on each other," Sophia said, "and look how well it turned out." The years that followed were full and rich, marked by hard work, simple pleasures, and deep love. The Triple R prospered under Preston's careful management and with Sophia's help. They expanded the herd, improved the buildings, and built the ranch into one of the most respected in the region. Sophia never did open a shop in town, but she did not need to. Word of her beautiful carvings spread, and people came to the ranch to commission pieces directly. She created everything from toys for children to elaborate decorative pieces for wealthy families, always working with the same care and attention to detail that had caught Preston's eye at the Christmas market. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Preston's brother who had died in the war, was born in the spring of 1878. He was followed by two daughters, Rebecca and Catherine, and then another son, James. The house that had once been so quiet and empty rang with the sounds of children's laughter and running feet. Preston proved to be a devoted father, patient, and loving with his children in the same way he had been with Sophia. He taught his sons to ride and work cattle, and insisted that his daughters learn the same skills because, as he said, "You never knew what life might require of you." Sophia raised their children with love and firmness, teaching them the value of hard work, the importance of kindness, and the beauty of creating something with your own hands. All 4 children learned to carve under their mother's patient instruction, though only Rebecca showed the same natural talent Sophia possessed. As the children grew, the cottage where Sophia had first lived became a workshop dedicated to her carving. Preston built her a larger workbench and installed better windows for light. He still brought her the finest pieces of wood he could find, and she still created beautiful things that people treasured. The Wheeler brothers became permanent fixtures at the Triple R, eventually building their own small houses on the property and bringing wives to share them. The ranch became something of a community, multiple families working together to build something lasting. Preston and Sophia grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had their challenges, as all couples do. There were years when the cattle prices fell and money was tight. There was the terrifying week when Rebecca developed pneumonia and they feared they might lose her. There were the inevitable disagreements and frustrations that come with sharing a life. But through it all, they never forgot the miracle of their beginning. Every Christmas, Preston would remind Sophia of the day he found her freezing at the market, and she would remind him that he had saved her in more ways than one. They would toast each other with the good whiskey Preston kept for special occasions and give thanks for the second chances that had brought them together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. Thomas was 23 now, married himself and helping run the Triple R. Rebecca was 21, a talented artist whose carvings were sought after throughout California. Catherine was 19 and engaged to a young lawyer from Sacramento. James, the baby at 17, was already taller than his father and showed promise of becoming an even better rancher than Preston. That evening, as the party wound down and the grandchildren were put to bed, Preston and Sophia walked out to the spot where they had been married 25 years earlier. The cottage where Sophia had lived was still there, maintained as her workshop, and the main house stood solid and welcoming behind them. "You ever regret it?" Preston asked, his arm around her waist. "Tying your life to mine, staying here instead of going off to see the world." Sophia looked at him in genuine surprise. "Regret it? Preston, you gave me everything I ever wanted. A home, a family, meaningful work, and a love that has sustained me through everything. Why would I regret any of that? I just want to make sure you are happy," he said, his expression serious. "That you do not feel like you gave up your dreams for mine." "My dreams changed when I met you," Sophia said, reaching up to cup his weathered face in her hand. "Or maybe they just became clearer. I dreamed of being seen and valued. I dreamed of creating beautiful things. I dreamed of loving and being loved in return. You helped me achieve all of that and more. I have never been anything but grateful for the day you walked up to my cart and bought everything in it." "Best $80 I ever spent," Preston said with a smile, pulling her close. "Even if I did spend the next 3 weeks finding places to put all those carvings." Sophia laughed, remembering how he had scattered her creations throughout the house, determined to display everything he had purchased. Some of those early pieces were still there, carefully preserved reminders of where their story had begun. They stood together in the gathering darkness, watching the stars come out one by one above the valley. Preston pressed a kiss to Sophia's temple and she leaned into him, marveling at how perfectly they fit together after all these years. "I love you," she whispered. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "And I love you," Preston replied. "My Christmas miracle, my second chance, my everything." The years continued to pass, bringing grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The Triple R remained in the family, passed from generation to generation, each adding their own improvements while honoring the foundation Preston and Sophia had built. Preston lived to see his 70th birthday, still active and engaged with the ranch until the very end. He died peacefully in his sleep, with Sophia beside him as she had been for 44 years of marriage. His last words to her were the same he had spoken on their wedding night. "I love you, Mrs. Riley." Sophia lived another 5 years after Preston's death, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who adored her. She continued carving almost until the end, her gnarled fingers still able to coax beauty from wood. She told stories about the early days of the ranch, keeping Preston's memory alive for the younger generations who had never known him. On a clear December day, almost exactly 50 years after Preston had bought her cart at the Christmas market, Sophia Turner Riley passed away quietly in the big bed she had shared with her husband for so many years. Her children found her there, a peaceful smile on her face and a carved wooden angel clutched in her hands, the very first one Preston had picked up all those years ago. She was laid to rest beside Preston on a hill overlooking the valley, under a headstone that read, "Together in life, together in eternity." She carved beauty, he built dreams, and together they created a love that would last forever. The Triple R continued to thrive, a lasting testament to what two people could build when they took a chance on each other. And every Christmas, the family gathered at the ranch to tell the story of how it all began, with a freezing woman at a Christmas market and a quiet rancher who saw beyond her circumstances to the treasure she truly was. The tradition became that each family member would receive a carved angel on their 18th birthday, replicas of that first angel Preston had admired. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come when we are at our lowest, and that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, transforming everything it touches. The story of Sophia and Preston became family legend, told and retold until every detail was polished bright with repetition. But the essence remained true, a tale of second chances, of seeing value where others saw nothing, and of building something lasting from the simplest beginning. In the end, that cold December day in Downieville, when a desperate woman stood freezing behind an unsold cart and a lonely rancher made an impulsive purchase, turned out to be the beginning of everything that mattered. It was the day two damaged people found each other and discovered that together they could create something more beautiful and enduring than either could have imagined alone. And on quiet winter evenings, when the snow fell soft over the Triple R and the lights glowed warm in the windows of the house Preston built and Sophia made a home, you could almost feel their presence still. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a legacy, and who proved that sometimes the best investments are made not with the head but with the heart. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the land, still raised cattle in the valley, and still kept a special place in the main house for the carvings their ancestor had made so long ago. The nativity scene Sophia created that first Christmas still came out every year, a treasured family heirloom that reminded them all of where they came from. And if you listened carefully on Christmas Eve, some swore you could hear the echo of Sophia's laugh and Preston's deep voice, still together, still in love, still marveling at the miracle that brought them together on that cold December day in 1876, when a quiet rancher bought an entire cart and found not just beautiful carvings, but the other half of his soul.